please, can you come with me? Let's go home.
Don't touch me! I wish you were the one who left instead of Dad.
What did you just say?
Grandma said you're the reason Daddy abandoned us. We don't want you anymore. I worked 2 jobs just to keep you alive.
Nobody asked you to.
Grandma, what have you done to my kids?
What would you do if the 2 people you loved most in this world, your own children, looked at you like you were a stranger? Not because you had done anything wrong, not because you had failed them, but because someone had spent years pouring poison into their ears, drop by drop, until they believed that the woman who bled for them, who went without food so they could eat, who cried alone every night so they would never see her break, was the reason their lives were incomplete. That is my story. My name is Linda Adeyemi, and for 23 years, I carried a weight that no woman should ever have to carry alone. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because it was the day after the twins turned 3 years old. We had celebrated with a small cake, nothing fancy, just a small sponge cake I bought from the bakery down the road. Victor and Vincent had chocolates all over their faces, laughing the way only toddlers can laugh, like the world is made entirely of joy. I took a photo of them. I still have it. It sits on my bedside table, and every morning when I wake up, I look at it to remind myself why I kept going. But the next morning, I woke up and Daniel was gone. Not gone like he stepped out to buy bread, gone like a person who had planned their exit carefully, quietly, the way a thief moves through a house in the dark. His clothes were missing from the wardrobe, his shoes, his briefcase, his phone was switched off. His number, when I called it from my neighbor's phone, rang out 3 times and then died completely. A new SIM. He had already gotten a new SIM. I stood in the middle of that bedroom for a long time. I did not cry immediately. I think my body did not yet understand what my eyes were seeing. I walked to the kitchen. The kettle was still warm. He had made tea that morning while I slept, while the twins slept, and then he had walked out the door and closed it softly behind him, like he was trying to not wake us. That was the kindest thing he did. He closed the door softly. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I do not know how long I sat there. When Victor cried from the bedroom, that is when I came back to myself. I wiped my face, I stood up, and I went to my son, because that is what mothers do. You fall apart on the floor, and then you stand up because someone needs you. I told no one immediately, not my family, not my neighbors. I thought maybe he would come back. I thought maybe there had been some emergency, some confusion, something I was missing. I spent 3 days calling every number I had for him. His office line rang and rang. His friend Emeka said he hadn't seen him. His cousin in Abuja said the same. It was on the 4th day that Mama Becca came, Daniel's mother. A tall woman, the kind who fills a room not with warmth but with authority. She wore a blue wrapper that day with a matching head tie tied high and sharp like a crown. She knocked twice and walked in before I answered, the way she had always done in my home, the way she had done since the first day Daniel brought me to her house, and she looked me up and down and said, with a smile that never reached her eyes, "So, this is the girl." She sat down in my sitting room, placed her handbag on her lap, and looked at me. Daniel called me. My heart jumped. "Where is he? Is he all right?" "He is fine." She said it the way you say the weather is fine. Flat, unbothered. He said he needs time away. He said the marriage is not working. I stared at her. "Not working? We have 3-year-old children. He never said anything to me." "Linda," she raised one hand, and the word came out like a full stop. Daniel did not leave for nothing. There are things a man tolerates in silence before he reaches his limit. "What things?" My voice was shaking. "What did I do?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw it then, something behind her eyes that was not grief, not even anger. It was something colder, satisfaction. "That is between you and your conscience," she said, and stood up. "I came to tell you that Daniel is safe and to let you know that I will be involved in your grandchildren's lives with or without your cooperation." She picked up her handbag. "Mama Becca, I stood. My knees were weak, but I stood. Please, tell me where he is. Tell him to come home. Tell his sons are asking for their father. She paused at the door. She did not turn around. Train them well. That is all I have for you. And she walked out. That was the first day of the war. I did not know it yet. I thought I was fighting for my marriage. I did not understand that the real battle, the one that would cost me the most, had not even started. So that night, I put Victor and Vincent to bed. I sang to them the way I always did, that old song my mother used to sing, soft and low. They held my hands in the dark, one on each side, and they fell asleep quickly, the way children do when they feel safe. I sat between them in the dark for a long time. Then I went to the kitchen and I opened my purse and I counted what I had. 4,300 naira. 2 small children. No husband. No explanation. No plan. I put the money back in my purse. I turned off the light and I made a decision. Not a loud decision, not a dramatic one. Just a quiet, firm, unbreakable decision. I will not fall. I did not know then that the harder test was not poverty. The harder test was standing in front of my own sons one day and seeing in their eyes something that looked very much like blame. But that day was still years away. For now, I had 4,000 naira and 2 sleeping boys who needed their mother to be strong. So I was strong.
People talk about heartbreak like it is a single moment, a door that closes, a voice that goes silent. But real heartbreak, the kind that reshapes a person, is not a moment. It is a season, a long, slow season that you live through day after day, pretending to the world and sometimes to yourself that you are fine, that you are managing, that you are not quietly coming apart at the seams. I got a job as a receptionist at a small logistics company in Surulere. The pay was small but steady. My neighbor, Mrs. Eze, a retired teacher with grown children and too much time, agreed to watch the twins in the mornings for a modest fee. I dropped them off at her door every day at 7:15, always with a packed lunch, always with a reminder to make sure Vincent took his inhaler if he coughed. Vincent had asthma, had it from birth. The hospital visits were frequent in those early years, steamy nights sitting beside a small boy struggling to breathe, my hand on his back, praying quietly, counting his breaths like they were money I was trying not to run out of. Those nights aged me. I felt them in my body, in the new lines around my eyes, in the way I startled awake at the smallest sound. I applied for a second job. A supermarket near the bus stop needed a cashier for evening shifts, 4 days a week. I took it. I worked mornings at the logistics company and evenings at the supermarket. By the time I got home at night, the boys were already asleep, bathed and fed by Mrs. Eze, who had become quietly essential to our survival. I would sit beside them for a few minutes, touch their faces. Then I would go to the kitchen and prepare what I could for the next day. I slept 4, sometimes 5 hours a night for 3 years. But the boys ate. They had school uniforms, they had textbooks. They did not know how close to the edge we lived, and that was the point. I wanted their childhood to be as ordinary as I could make it. I wanted them to remember playing, not their mother's tired eyes. The problem was Mama Becca. She came every 2 weeks, always unannounced, always carrying something, a bag of rice, a tin of Milo, clothes for the boys. She never came empty-handed, and I understood early that this was not generosity, it was strategy. You cannot reject a woman who brings food for your children. You cannot close your door to the grandmother. The gifts were not for me, they were a lease she was paying on access. She would sit with the boys and talk to them. I noticed it slowly at first. Small things. Your daddy is a good man, you know. Sometimes good men get pushed away. Victor, who was 5, asked me one evening, "Mommy, did you push Daddy?" I froze, crouched down to his level. "Who told you that?" He shrugged in the way children shrug when they are repeating something they only half understood. I said nothing to Mama Becca. Not that time. I told myself he was 5. Children repeat things without knowing what they mean. But it continued, subtle, slow, surgical. By the time the boys were 7, they had a full narrative about their father, a man who was kind, who was wronged, who had been driven out of his own home. I never heard Mama Becca say it plainly in front of me. She was too careful for that. She walked in private moments, in the times I was in the kitchen, in the times I stepped away to take a call. She worked in the quiet spaces between my presence. I confronted her once. The boys were 8. Vincent had come home and told me that Grandma Becca said, "Some women don't know how to keep a man." He didn't know he was repeating something meant for me. He said it cheerfully, the way children report interesting facts. I called Mama Becca that evening. "You are confusing my children," I said. I had rehearsed the words. I wanted to be calm. They are growing up with a false story about why their father left. "I am their grandmother," she said. Her voice was cool, not angry, cool. "Linda." And now the coolness cracked just slightly, just enough for me to hear what was underneath it. A hard, set contempt. "My son left, that is a fact. The reasons are between him and God. But do not call me a liar in your one-room voice." She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Your one-room voice. That was what she thought of me. That was what she had always thought of me. A small woman. A woman without weight. A woman who could be managed. I should have fought harder then. I have asked myself 1,000 times why I didn't. Why I didn't sit my sons down and tell them the truth directly, plainly, with evidence. The answer is that I was afraid. Not of Mama Becca. I was afraid of what the truth might do to them. They were children. They loved their grandmother. They had already lost a father. If I turned them against Mama Becca too, what would they have? What family would they have? So I stayed quiet, and she kept working. By the time the boys were 12, they were different with me. Not cruel, not yet, but distant, watchful. There was a new carefulness in the way they spoke to me, like they were measuring their words, like they were not entirely sure which side I was on. Victor, who was always the more sensitive one, started pulling away physically. No more hugs at the door, no more holding my hand in the market. Vincent followed his brother's lead the way he always did. I told myself it was adolescence. I told myself boys pull away from their mothers at 12. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was also the other thing. Both things can be true at once. That's what makes it so hard to fight. I increased my hours at work. I focused on school fees, on food, on keeping the lights on. I attended every parent-teacher meeting. I sat with them through exams, quizzing them, drilling them, refusing to let their grades fall. When Vincent's asthma flared in JSS 2 and he missed 3 weeks of school, I hand-copied his notes from his classmates and tutored him myself at night until he had caught up. They passed, both of them. They always passed. I told myself, even if they don't see it now, one day they will understand. I told myself that for years. By the time Victor and Vincent were 17, I had lost them in the ways that matter most. They were still in my house. They still ate my food. They came home at night and slept in the beds I paid for. But there was a wall between us. Not a violent wall, not a screaming wall. The quieter kind. The kind built from years of small moments, accumulated looks, half sentences, and silences that stretched too long. Victor had become a serious, focused young man. Tall like his father, with his father's jaw and his father's way of standing, slightly back, slightly apart, like he was always assessing the room. He was brilliant in school. Science subjects, mathematics, anything with clear rules and correct answers. He liked things he could prove. Vincent was warmer, more instinctive. He laughed more easily than his brother, but he followed Victor, had always followed Victor.
Whatever conclusion Victor reached, Vincent arrived at the same place slightly behind him, and that was where he stayed. The conversations with me had shrunk to logistics. Mom, have you paid the school fees? Mom, there's no gas. Mom, I need money for the excursion. No more sitting with me in the evenings. No more telling me about their days. When their friends visited, they kept them in their room, away from me, the way teenagers keep compartments separate. I remember one evening, they were in final year preparing for WAEC. I had cooked their favorite meal, egusi soup with stockfish and pomo, the way my mother taught me, the way they used to beg for it as small boys. I called them to dinner, and Victor came to the table, looked at the food and said, "I'm not really hungry." He went back to his room. Vincent looked at me, then looked at his brothers retreating back, and then looked at his plate. He ate, but quietly, without the pleasure of it. I sat at the table alone after they had both gone to their rooms, and I ate the food I had made, and I counted the sounds in the house, the fan in the boys' room, the generator outside, the distant sound of a television from next door, and I realized I could not remember the last time one of my sons had said, "Thank you, Mom." Not as a complaint, just as a fact I was registering. I cleared the table, I washed the plates, I checked the locks on the door. I did not cry until I was in the bathroom with the water running. The visits to Mama Becca's house had been regular throughout their teens. She had moved to a bigger house in Magodo by then. Her younger son abroad had been sending money, and it showed. New tiles, a black gate with a brass handle, a sitting room that smelt of carpet freshener and pride. The boys always came back from there slightly different, quieter toward me, more confident in their distance. I tried once more to speak to them directly. They were 16. I sat them both down and I said, "I need you to know that your father left on his own. I did not drive him away. I have never told you this plainly because I didn't want to put things in your hearts before you are ready. But I need you to hear me say it. I love you, and I have given everything I had for this family." Victor looked at me for a long moment. "Okay, Mom," he said. That was all. "Okay, Mom." Not "I believe you," not "thank you." Just "okay," like I had read them a weather report. Vincent said nothing. I nodded. I said goodnight. I went to my room. They passed their WAEC with flying colors, both of them. Victor scored A's across the board. Vincent was slightly behind but still strong. I held those result slips and I wept. Not from sadness, from something more complicated. Pride and grief at the same time, which is one of the stranger feelings a parent can carry. I got a loan to pay for their university. Victor went into engineering at UNLG. Vincent medicine at UI. Different cities, different futures. I drove them both to their respective schools in borrowed cars, helped them settle into their hostels, bought them mattresses and food items and small things for their rooms. Victor hugged me at the gate of his hostel. Brief, formal, the kind of hug you give a distant aunt. Vincent looked back once as he walked into the building. I drove home alone on the Lagos Expressway with the radio on and nothing to say to anyone. The house was very quiet that night. It was the first time in 17 years that I had been alone in it. If this story is already reaching into your chest, subscribe to Raina Tales so you never miss a story like this. This story is far from over, and what comes next will shake everything. He came back on a Thursday. I did not know he had come back. Nobody told me. I heard it the way you hear most things in Lagos, sideways, through someone else's story. My colleague at work, a woman named Priscilla, who knew everyone and everything, leaned across her desk one afternoon and said, "Your in-law people, are they not in Bagada? I saw a man there last week that looks so much like those your twins. Older man. They say he just came back from Canada." I kept my face still. "Okay," I said. "They say he has been there 2-3 weeks already. Reconnecting, they say." I went home that evening and called Vincent. He picked up on the third ring. There was a pause before he said hello, the kind of pause that told me he had seen my name on the screen and considered not answering. "Mom?"
Is your father in Lagos? Silence. Longer than it should have been. He came to visit, Vincent said finally. He reached out to us. How long have you known? Another pause. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. My sons had known for 20 weeks that their father had returned after 20 years, and nobody had thought to tell me. I was the last to know in a story I had lived inside for 2 decades. Okay, I said. Mom, it's okay, Vincent. I just wanted to know. I hung up. I sat on my bed and I breathed slowly, the way I had taught myself to breathe when things became too large for immediate feeling. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Again. Daniel Adeyemi had come back. 20 years. The twins were 23 years old. Victor was running his own engineering consulting firm, small but growing. Vincent had just completed his housemanship at a hospital in Ibadan. They were men I had built from almost nothing on my own salary with my own sleepless nights. And their father had walked back into their lives and had apparently been welcomed, naturally, without hesitation, without question. I wondered what story he had told them. I wondered if he cried. Daniel was good at crying when it served him. I wondered if he looked old, if his hair had gone grey, if 20 years had been kind to him or hard on him. I wondered if he had thought about us, whether in those 20 years, somewhere in Canada or wherever he had been, if he had ever been lying in the dark and thought about 2 small boys asleep in a Lagos flat and a woman counting 4,000 naira on a kitchen floor. I wondered. Then I stopped wondering because wondering served nothing. I called Victor. He did not pick up. I called again the next morning. He picked up and immediately said, Mom, I know what you are going to say. Just can you give us time to process this? We haven't seen him in 20 years. We just want to understand. Victor, I'm not calling to ask you not to see him. He paused. Oh, he is your father. That doesn't change because of what he did. See him. Talk to him. I'm not asking you to choose. Silence. I'm just asking you to also remember what you know, what you lived, who was there. I heard him breathe. He didn't say anything. Okay, I said. Take care of yourself. I hung up before he could respond. I want to be honest about something. I was not as calm as I sounded on that phone call. Inside, there was something burning. Not anger exactly, something more painful than anger. The particular pain of watching people you love be charmed by someone who does not deserve their love, and knowing that if you say so, you will be the one who looks bitter, looks jealous, looks like you are trying to steal their joy. So, I stayed quiet. I had stayed quiet for 20 years. A little longer would not kill me. Or so I thought. What I did not know, what none of us knew yet, was that Daniel's return had set something in motion. Not in me, in Victor. Victor who liked things he could prove. Victor who did not accept a narrative without evidence. Victor who had been told a story his whole life about a mother who drove a father away and who had never, not once, sat down and actually looked for proof. He was about to start looking.
It was Victor who found it. He told me about it later, much later, after everything had changed. He told me in a quiet voice, the way people talk when they are describing something that rearranged them internally. He said he had not set out to investigate. He had just started asking questions. It started with a dinner. Daniel had taken the twins to a restaurant in Victoria Island, somewhere expensive, somewhere that announced itself. He was charming at dinner. Victor said he was the kind of man who made a room feel like it was lucky to have him in it. Good stories, easy laughter, the kind of presence that makes you understand why someone was once loved. But Victor was an engineer. His mind worked in structures, and the structure of his father's story, the version he had heard from Mama Becca all his life, the version that painted Linda as difficult, consuming, impossible, had a load-bearing wall that he had never actually tested. He asked his father over dessert simply, "Why did you leave?" And Daniel, smooth and practiced, said,
Your mother and I wanted different things. It became impossible to stay. I needed to find myself. I knew you'd be well taken care of. I knew you'd be well taken care of. Victor turned that sentence over in his head on the drive home. He told me later it was that sentence that cracked something open. Because taken care of by whom? By a woman you left with no money and no explanation? By a woman working double shifts while you were in Canada finding yourself? He started with the simple things. He called his mother's former employer from those early years, a man who had retired, but whom Victor tracked down through an old colleague of mine. The man remembered me. He said, "Your mother was one of the hardest working people I ever had. She was always there early, always there late. She told me once she was doing an evening shift somewhere else too. I didn't know she had twins at home." Then, Victor did something that even he said surprised him. He went to Mama Becca's house. Not to accuse, just to talk, to ask questions. Mama Becca was 71 now. She had slowed down physically but not mentally. She received Victor warmly, made tea, asked about his firm, and Victor, careful and methodical, let her talk. He asked her about those early years, about Daniel's leaving, about her visits to our flat. She told him the same story she had always told. Daniel left because Linda was controlling. Linda didn't support his ambitions. Linda made the home a cold place. Victor nodded. He said, "Grandma, do you have any old photos from that time? Letters, anything from Dad?" She brought out an old box. She was proud in the way people are proud of physical evidence. She wanted him to see. What she had forgotten was that old people keep everything. In that box, wrapped in a polythene bag, were printed emails, old emails from Daniel from those early years. Some addressed to her, some that she had printed out for reasons Victor couldn't determine. He asked if he could photograph them to read later. She said yes, of course, thinking he was simply a son wanting to understand his family history. He photographed them all. He read them that night in his car, parked outside his office with his phone screen on full brightness. He called Vincent at 11:15 p.m. "Come to me," he said. "Now." Vincent drove from the mainland. He arrived after midnight. Victor showed him the phone screen. One email in particular, from Daniel to Mama Becca, dated 6 months before he left. 6 months before the twins turned 3. "Mama, I have decided. I will leave before the year ends. I am tired of this life. Yemi in Toronto has been asking me to come. I know you will tell me to think of the boys, but I have thought about it, and I believe they will be better off without detention. Linda will manage. She is the type of woman who manages. Don't try to convince me to stay." Vincent read it twice. Then he scrolled to Mama Becca's reply. "My son, I understand. A man must follow his path. I will look after the boys. Come back when you are settled. Don't worry about Linda." Silence in the car. Don't worry about Linda. She knew, not suspected, known. 6 months before he walked out, she knew her son was planning to abandon his wife and 3-year-old twins. And her response was, "Don't worry about Linda." And then she has spent the next 20 years feeding those same boys a story of a mother who drove a man away. Vincent put the phone down on the seat between them. "She knew," he said. Victor stared at the windscreen for a long moment. Then he said, "I want you to think about every time Mom tried to talk to us, every time she looked at us at a table, every time she picked up the phone and we didn't answer. Think about who she was being and what she knew and how she still never once put this in our faces." Vincent pressed the back of his mouth to his hand. Outside, Lagos moved and breathed and roared the way it always does, indifferent, enormous, full of other people's stories. Inside that car, 2 young men who had spent years building a wall between themselves and their mother understood for the first time what it had cost her to let them. Victor said quietly. We owe her more than an apology.
I was in my kitchen on a Saturday morning when I heard the gate. I was not expecting anyone. I had spent the morning the way I spend most Saturdays now, slowly, without urgency, moving through small tasks. I had made akara from scratch, the way my mother used to, standing at the stove and listening to music from my phone propped against the spice rack. I was in a house dress. My hair was not done. The knock at the door was not tentative. It was the knock of people who know where they belong. I opened the door. Victor and Vincent stood on my doorstep. They were in casual clothes. No occasion, no announcement. Victor had his hands in his pockets. Vincent was holding a nylon bag. I could see the top of a pineapple juice carton, the corner of what looked like chin-chin in a container. They had brought food. I had not seen them in 4 months. I looked at them. I looked at their faces. And something about those faces, the set of them, the way they were looking at me so directly, without the usual careful management, told me that something had shifted, that the air between us was different. I stepped back. I let them in. We sat in the sitting room. I brought plates for the akara. Victor took one and held it and didn't eat. Vincent ate too quickly, the way he always ate when he was nervous, feeding himself through discomfort. Then Victor looked at me. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." I had been waiting for something for 20 years. I hadn't known exactly what shape it would take. I thought maybe I would be angry when it finally came. I thought maybe I would need to release something, say things I had been holding, make them understand the specific textures of what I had carried. But sitting there in my house dress, with my kitchen smelling of frying bean cakes, looking at my 2 sons across my sitting room table, all I felt was very tired and very, very glad they were here. "Tell me," I said. Victor took out his phone. He showed me the emails. I read them slowly. I recognized Daniel's voice in the writing, that particular way he had of making his choices sound inevitable, like things that were happening to him rather than things he was doing. "I have decided. I will leave," like a weather announcement. I read Mama Becca's response. "Don't worry about Linda." I read it 3 times. I put the phone down on the table. For a long moment, nobody said anything. Then Vincent said, in a voice I had not heard from him since he was a small boy, "Mom, I'm sorry." And Victor said, "I am so sorry." And that was when I cried. Not immediately. It started slowly, the way deep things start. A trembling in the chest, a tightening in the throat, and then the release, which is less like crying and more like something enormous giving way. I did not cry from pain. I want to be clear about that. The pain had been lived already, had been absorbed year by year into the body that was still sitting in front of them. What I cried from was the ending of the holding, the relief of being seen finally and fully by the exact people whose sight had mattered most. Victor moved to sit beside me. He put his arm around my shoulders the way he had not done since he was a child, and I put my face in my hand and I let it out, all of it. All the Tuesday mornings and midnight hospital visits and parent-teacher meetings attended alone and phone calls that rang out and dinners eaten in silence and nights I sat between them as they slept and begged God just to keep me standing long enough. Vincent came to the other side. Both of them, my sons on either side of me in the sitting room of the house I had kept together by myself for 20 years. We sat like that for a long time. When I could speak, I said, "I never told you because I didn't want to be the one who took something from you, even if that thing was a lie." Victor said, "We know, Mom. That's what we finally understand." 3 weeks later, there was a dinner. The boys planned it. They called it a family dinner, and they invited people, their friends, a few relatives on my side, the neighbors who had watched us through those years. Mrs. Eze was there, grey-haired and happy, holding my hand at the table. Victor stood up halfway through the meal. He was not a person who made speeches. He had his father's height, but none of his father's showmanship. He spoke plainly, the way engineers speak, clearly, without decoration, but with weight. He said that he and his brother had grown up with a story that was not true. He said they had spent years directing coolness and distance at a woman who deserved the opposite. He said he was not going to describe the details publicly, but that they had found evidence, clear, undeniable evidence, that their father had left voluntarily and that someone close to them had known and chose to, for 20 years, let them believe that thing otherwise. He said, "Our mother worked 2 jobs. She slept 5 hours a night for years. She attended every meeting, paid every school fee, sat with us through every illness. She never once made us feel like burdens. She never once told us the truth about what she knew because she was trying to protect us from it. That is not the behavior of a woman who drove anyone away. That is the behavior of a woman who stayed." He picked up his glass. "To our mother, Linda Ademi, the only parent we actually had." The room raised their glasses. I looked at my hands on the table. I felt Mrs. Eze squeeze my fingers. Daniel was not at that dinner. I heard later he had gone back to Canada. The reunion with his sons had not gone the way he planned once they had read those emails. They had met with him once more, Victor told me this briefly, not with anger, but with a flatness that said the chapter was closed. And they had told him what they knew and what they expected, which was nothing, and that he should leave them to live their lives without further confusion. He left. Mama Becca, I heard, had tried to call Victor a few times in the weeks after. He did not answer. She called me once. I let it ring. I did not need to speak to her. I did not need the apology, which I suspect would not come anyway. What I needed, I already had. My sons, home, seeing me clearly at last, with the evidence of 20 years of love spread between us, like a meal finally arrived. The night after the dinner, after everyone had gone home and the boys had stayed to help me clear up, Vincent found me standing at the kitchen window. The city was loud outside, the way Lagos is always loud, motorbikes and generators and the shouts of the street. He came and stood beside me. "Mom," he said, "what would have you done if we'd never found out?" I thought about it honestly. I said, "I would have kept going. What else?" He was quiet. "That's the thing about you," he said. "You are always going to keep going." I looked at my son, 23 years old, his father's height, but something in the eyes that was entirely his own, something warm, something that had survived everything and was still warm. "Yes," I said, "because you were worth keeping going for." He put his arm around me, and we stood at the window for a while, looking out at the city. This story is for every mother who has gone unseen, every woman who packed lunches and paid fees and swallowed the truth to protect people who didn't know they needed protecting, every woman who kept the lights on alone and called it ordinary. It was never ordinary. You were never just managing. You were holding the whole thing together. And one day, one ordinary Saturday morning, when the akara is frying and the music is playing, they will come back. They will knock like they know where they belong, because they will.